We're going to be looking at special right triangles. In this lesson, we're going to focus on the 45-45-90, also called an isosceles right triangle, because we have two sides that are equal and two angles that are equal. Now, the important part with special right triangles is that, unlike Pythagorean theorem, where I have to know two sides to find the third side, in a special right triangle, if I know one side, I can find the other two. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this 45-45-90 and we're going to call the two sides that are equal the legs, and then we'll have the hypotenuse here. Now I'm going to do Pythagorean theorem using those variables to get L squared plus L squared equals H squared. But L squared plus L squared would be 2L squared equals H squared. And then I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Well, when I do that, the square root of H squared is just going to be H. And the square root of 2L squared can be written as the square root of 2 times the square root of L squared. But that is the square root of 2 times L. Or we could say H is equal to L times the square root of 2. So we now know a formula for the hypotenuse. To get the hypotenuse, we take the leg times the square root of 2. But if I have this formula that H equals L times the square root of 2, I can solve for L by dividing by the square root of 2 and get that L is H divided by the square root of 2. Now, one way you can remember this is that if you have the hypotenuse, it's the bigger side of the triangle. So to get back to one of the shorter sides, the legs, I would divide. And if you know the shorter side, you multiply to get the hypotenuse. And that's what this theorem, the 45-45-90 theorem says, is that the hypotenuse is always the square root of 2 times the leg. So let's look at this example. If we know that this side is 8, then this side would have to be 8 because we have a 45-45-90. So that would make this 8. And according to our formula, the hypotenuse is just the leg times the square root of 2. So that's 8 times the square root of 2, which would be 8 square root of 2. Now, a lot of times on the air test, you'll leave the answer in that form, but sometimes they'll want it in decimal. So then you'll just take your calculator and switch that over into decimal form. So if I have 8 square root of 2, that would be 11.3 in decimal. On the next problem, we have 3 square root of 2 for our leg. So to get our hypotenuse, we do 3 square root of 2 times the square root of 2. Now, we used our calculator and put that in, and what we did, we got 6 for our hypotenuse. In the next set of examples, we're actually going to work backwards, and we're going to find the hypotenuse when I have the legs. We're going to find the legs when I have the hypotenuse. So in this example, I have that the hypotenuse is 5 square root of 2. Since the hypotenuse is bigger, I would divide. So if I take 5 square root of 2 and divide by the square root of 2, those are going to cancel. I'm going to get 5. So these two sides are 5. Then if my hypotenuse is 2, I'm going to divide by the square root of 2. And again, we used our calculator to see that did simplify down to just square root of 2. Now, I did go through and show them, because you'll learn this in Algebra 2, that there is, in Algebra 2, you talk about a process called rationalizing the denominator. What you do is you get a square root out of the bottom. To do that, you multiply the top and the bottom by the square root of 2 in this case. Well, that would give me 2 square root of 2 over the square root of 4. But we know that the square root of 4 is 2. And then the 2 here, we cancel with the 2 there. And that's how they get just square root of 2. Now we're going to look at a table. If I can get us focused here. And we have that. We have sides A, B, and C. A and B are our legs, and C is our hypotenuse. Now again, we know that our legs are equal. So in our first example, if A is 8, then B would also be 8. And then to get our hypotenuse, again, we're going to a bigger side, so we multiply by the square root of 2. In the next one, we have a leg of 15, which means that side A would also be 15. And our hypotenuse would be 15 square root of 2. In our next example, we have that C, which is the hypotenuse, is 6. So to get the leg, we divide by the square root of 2. And we would put that in our calculator and get that that's 3 square root of 2. In our next column, we know that the hypotenuse is 9 square root of 2. So I would take 9 square root of 2 and divide by the square root of 2. And that's going to give me that my 2 legs are 9. And then my last column, I have that one of the legs is square root of 7, which makes the other leg square root of 7. And the hypotenuse will be the square root of 7 times the square root of 2, which will be the square root of 14.